afternoon. Thanks for attending our webinar on buying versus lending, which is the best strategy for your IRA. Today we're going to be discussing the two most common strategies for self-directed IRAs. And as Alex mentioned earlier, if you're just joining us, everybody is muted, so please go ahead and if you do have questions, type them into the question box and we'll answer questions throughout the webinar. My name is Larissa Green. I've been with Advanta IRA for almost 8 years now, and joining me today is my partner, Alex Perney. How you doing today, Alex?
Exceedingly well, Larissa.
Awesome. So you're going to hear from both of us throughout the webinar. We're going to go over different aspects of investing into real estate and private lending in a self-directed retirement account. We are Advanta IRA. We have two offices. Alex and I are both located in our Largo, Florida office. We also have an office in Atlanta, Georgia. The corporate office is really the Largo office where we handle all the back office paperwork and any transactions for self-directed IRAs. And in Atlanta, we handle things like webinars and lunch and learns on a regular basis. We've been doing self-directed IRAs and other qualified plans for about 16 years now. And the biggest difference between us and our competitors is that every one of our IRA account holders does receive an account manager that goes along with their account and helps them with anything they need, from questions on making contributions all the way through any transaction that they're working on. So it gives you an opportunity to have a relationship with the person on the other end rather than just calling a 1-800 number and speaking to someone that has to review your account.
And in order to make the attorneys happy, Advanta IRA and our employees do not give tax, legal, or investment advice, nor do we endorse, promote, or sell any investment products. All information and materials are for educational purposes only. All parties are encouraged to consult with their attorneys, accountants, financial advisors, or other qualified individuals before entering into any type of investment.
So keep in mind, what we discuss a lot at Advanta IRA is IRC 4975, or basically the code the IRS has written for self-directed IRAs and retirement accounts in general. But if you do have a question that you feel falls outside of that scope, you can ask us anyway, and we may be able to get you in touch with a professional that can help you with your question.
Yeah, I always tell people, give us a call, since we're the free phone call you can make, and if we can answer it, we can save you an hour of your CPA or attorney's time. But we can certainly get right up to the point that we can answer it, and then let you know when you actually do need a full legal opinion for that. So always feel free to give us a call.
A lot of what we're going to go over today might be overwhelming to you if this is your first exposure to self-directed IRAs. And so what I like to tell people to keep in mind is that there's three very important points. And as long as you understand those points, everything else is something you can reach out and give us a call. But when you're looking at investments, when you're out there on your own without us looking at investments for your retirement account, just keep in mind that any IRA or former employer plan qualifies. You choose the investment. So Advanta doesn't have any investments to sell you at all. We provide a service. And all expenses for that investment are paid by the IRA, and any income is received by the IRA. So again, as long as you remember those three key points, you can reach out to us with any additional questions that you have.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, as Larissa was alluding to, is that, we don't endorse or promote or sell any investment products. So that's kind of one of the prevailing reasons why a lot of people haven't heard of self-direction, is that we're simply a service provider allowing you to go out and select, identify, vet, and invest in the investment that you've actually selected. And the majority of what we see clients investing in is real estate. We have roughly a little bit over $1 billion of asset under administration, and I'd say probably between 70 to 80% of that is based in real estate. Now, the reason that you haven't heard of stuff like this is that large brokerages, one, don't have really the desire to have the specialized accounting and services that go with having a very hands-on type of investment like that, and two, they don't have real estate to sell you. So that's one reason that the economy of scale works with something like that, and that you hear so much more about it, is because it's a lot easier for people to get into. But the IRS doesn't actually write a rule book saying, hey, here's a list of acceptable investments. Something I do like to tell people quite often is that if anyone ever approaches you and says that they have an IRS that they have an IRS qualified investment, or that they have an IRS approved investment, run, because there literally is no such thing. The IRS really only dictates a few things you cannot invest in, but really gives it up to the custodians be it someone like us at Advanta or a custodian like Charles Schwab or Fidelity, to determine what their clients can invest in. We specialize really in everything that they don't, and they specialize in things that we don't. And we only really make up about 4% or less, depending on some of the metrics that you look at, of the entire retirement industry, which is, as of last count, I believe somewhere, roughly $27 trillion of investment assets in the United States. So when you take 4% of that is our market, you can see why it's not as widely covered as some of the other types of retirement plans, or services, I should say.
We also want to go over very quickly the different types of plans that can be self-directed. And the reason I almost always include this slide in our presentations is because a lot of times people, for some reason, think that it has to be a Roth IRA if you want to invest in things like real estate and private lending. I'm not really sure where that comes from, but the truth is if it ends in IRA, it can be self-directed. And then there are a few other plans available to self-direct as well. So a solo 401k or an individual K plan can be self-directed, as well as an education savings account and a health savings account. And the rules for self-directing those two types of accounts are going to be exactly the same, so we can hold them as well. Not listed up here, but can be included, is any old employer plan. So if you sever ties with an employer, you have an old plan sitting, not earning what you're hoping it could, you can roll it into an IRA or another type of employer's plan and self-direct those funds. So you have the opportunity. Another big question that I get is, well, what if I'm still currently employed and active in that plan? And the answer is, it's going to be up to the plan administrator and the plan documents as to whether or not you're going to be allowed to do what they call an in-service rollover or an in-service distribution, where that would allow you to take some or all of the funds and move them into a plan that you can self-direct. So you would have to check with your employer on that. But outside of that, if you're no longer with that employer, you certainly can roll it over and make those investments that you want to make.
And one aside to that is that if you are currently still employed with a employer that offers a 401k plan, for the most part, as Larissa said, that typically you cannot move funds out of an actively participated plan. However, if you are of the age of 59 and a half, the likelihood that you can roll out of that plan is much greater, but it never hurts to ask. Again, just give your HR rep a call, say, hey, can I do an in-service rollover? And they'll say yes or no. The worst they can say is no. Best case scenario, they say yes, and then you can port that plan directly over to, in most cases, a traditional IRA, and then self-direct or really do whatever you'd like to with it. And in some cases, they are pretty cool in that they might have a Roth component, so you would be able to fund a Roth IRA with that rollover as well.
So the IRS does not provide us with a list of investments that you can make. So there's no way to go to the IRS website and look up investments and see if, okay, is this an investment, as Alex mentioned, approved by the IRS. What they did instead is give us a very short list of investments we can't make, and we're really not going to go into it during this webinar, but if you're interested in learning about, more specifically the rules for investing, you can check out any one of our YouTube channel webinars that we've archived there on getting started or investing in real estate, where we cover the rules more extensively. In the next couple of slides, what we've done is cover some investments that we have seen to really just give you an idea of what is out there before we talk specifically about real estate and private lending. So, of course, real estate, pretty much in any form, and we'll go into that in more detail in just a few moments, but just keep in mind that according to the rules, it does have to be real estate for investment purposes. So third-party use, whether you're renting it out, whether you're fixing and flipping it, just keep in mind that it's not something like a vacation home or a second home for you. It does have to be for investment purposes.
But and just to kind of piggyback on this before I kind of dive into some of the paper assets, is that you can certainly buy a house and utilize it as a vacation rental if you are renting it out to other vacationers. You just can't personally utilize it. But especially down here in our area of Florida, we have plenty of people that own things that do like VRBO or Airbnb, where they rent it out short term, and maybe they have a little bit more of a formalized vacation rental service that rents it out to people like spring breakers or retirees. So the usage, again, is not important. It's just a matter of the fact that you are not personally utilizing it. Now, the other half of real estate is lending. Real estate is a very expensive proposition for anyone to purchase. It's not like going down to the market and buying a gallon of milk. It is hundreds of thousands of dollars if not millions of dollars most of the time. So there is a very healthy market for people to lend money to people that are invested in real estate. And we're going to get into the dichotomy of the advantages versus the disadvantages by virtue of this webinar between lending and buying real estate. But the different types of assets that you can acquire with regard to lending are things like mortgage loans, where you would have a piece of real estate securing the actual promissory note. Things like tax liens, where you buy the debt rolls from your county's tax collector for collecting on those. There doesn't have to be security. You can get into private placements with debentures and options. The options out there are very varied, and they are something that you can do a lot of research into, to the point where you can honestly kind of get confused to the point. But there is, well, I guess that's kind of the point I was trying to make. I thought I had another one, but I guess we go to the next slide now.
And I would say, too, that something like an option contract or maybe assignments of contracts, those are maybe more advanced strategies that we see people using. The great thing about an option is it's something longer term. So I wouldn't call it a set it and forget it investment, but it definitely is something where you could possibly hold it for years. And so that might be something when you're starting out with a smaller amount of money to consider. But again, do your research on that, because I do consider it a more advanced strategy. We also have up here the different types of investments outside of real estate that we see people making. And of course, the beauty of a self-directed IRA is going to be that you can invest in what you know best. And so some of these investments may seem very unique to some of us, but to others, they're going to feel right at home, something they understand completely and where they want their retirement account to grow. So LLCs, we see those in a lot of different, being used for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's single member for checkbook control, and we do have a webinar archived on that, and we do those pretty frequently because it is a fairly popular subject that we cover. But using a single member LLC to then have the IRA invest in it, and as the manager having checkbook control of your IRA funds. It could also be into just something like a startup company. So LLCs, where maybe you have a friend or of a company, they're just getting started, they're looking for funding, they're looking for, people who want to buy shares in that company to help the funding. That's pretty common with a self-directed IRA, because it's not going to be something that a brokerage firm is willing to help you with. We've seen people invest in things like racehorses, cattle, alpaca. We had a client buy hogs a couple weeks ago. So again, maybe unique investments, but something that, the people with their retirement accounts, they know that investment the best. We've seen partnerships of all kinds. We've seen clients invest in movie projects and precious metals. And when we're talking about precious metals, we mean the actual tangible gold and silver bars and coins. And you can make those investments as long as the value of the metal is based on what it's trading at. So it can't be anything considered unique or rare that would fall under something that is prohibited as far as investments in a self-directed IRA. We've also seen people do equipment leasing, like large format printers, ATM machines, farm equipment. So there's lots of different strategies for equipment leasing. We see foreign currency exchange, private stock, commodities, and oil and gas. So again, these lists are just to give you an idea of what we're seeing people invest in, and especially this one, things outside of real estate.
And before we jump off this slide, Larissa, I need to kind of go back and amend something I said, is that the IRS does not give you a list of approved investments. There is one small asterisk to that. Larissa mentioned investing in precious metals. The IRS actually does define what qualifies as a precious metal for their purposes of holding it in an IRA. It has to meet minimum fineness requirements, so being 0.9995% pure, and also can only be a certain group of metals, be that platinum, palladium, gold, or silver. So some gold products, even though that they may be advertised as pure, one common example is the South African Cougaran does not qualify for investment into an IRA. Just keep that in mind, because gold brokers do like to say that they have IRS-approved investments, and I don't want you to think that I said there was no such thing. So that is the one kind of asterisk to that one that is there. So if you'd like to use your IRA funds to invest in real estate, the biggest issue that we see from people that come to us and say, hey, I wish I'd known about this earlier, is that they take funds out of an old 401k, pay taxes and penalties, which in some cases can be 30% or more of their basis, in that plan. So if they had $100,000, they might only walk away with $70,000 or $65,000 to invest in real estate, and then have to pay taxes on any gains that they make after that. So we tell people, first give us a call. Make sure that you understand that you have options when it comes to this, that you don't have to take everything as a distribution. We can typically do this inside of an IRA and make you and allow you to not have to pay those taxes ongoing or presently. So again, remember, if you move the funds from the IRA or the 401k that you're rolling over from, you pretty much have done something that is irreversible unless it's within the first 60 days. So I kind of got lost on this. And by transferring these over to us, the nice thing is that when you look at a future revenue stream, you're not going to have to pay capital gains tax, you're not going to have to pay ordinary income taxes. So not only does it allow you to use more of your basis, so that initial $100,000 that you might have had, but it also allows you to mitigate the taxes going on down in the future. So any rent payments, any payments from amortizing loans, anything when you sell an asset or a loan pays off, nothing of that is going to be taxable to the IRA. And it doesn't matter what kind of IRA you have. People get so often hung up on, do I need a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, or should I go with a SEP or a SIMPLE or a 401k? The thing that they fail to realize is that the differences between all these plans really is just in the very beginning when you add money and at the very end when you take money out. They're all treated exactly the same from a tax standpoint with regards to whether or not they pay ordinary income tax or whether they pay capital gains, and that none of them do. And the example that we give down here is a client has $100,000 in an IRA. They don't know about self-directed IRA. They remove the cash from their current custodian, and they have to pay a 10% taxable penalty right off the bat. So you're going to pay in that $100,000, you're going to pay $10,000 to Uncle Sam right from the beginning. You don't have any questions. You can't do anything about it. And if you're taking it out of a 401k, they have 20% required withholding, so you're also going to have another 20% taken out of that directly right there, not including what you might additionally have to pay in taxes. So just keep in mind that you can cause yourself a lot of headaches by just taking something out of a 401k to invest in real estate, and you can really save yourself a lot of trouble if you just realize that the options are out there for you to do things that you didn't realize you could directly in the IRA itself.
And that's so true. I meet so many people, and this is absolutely true, that say, I wish I had known about you guys 6 months ago, or I spoke to somebody not too long ago that said, is a year too long to roll the funds back into a retirement account because I took the distribution and then the deal didn't work out 90 days later. So unfortunately, at that point, it is too late to put the money back. And so, Alex and I are doing the best that we can to get the word out there, but unfortunately, not enough people know about this option in self-directed IRAs. So when you're investing or considering investing in real estate with an IRA, there are so many options available to you. And, I always tell people it's the strategy that you're most comfortable with. And so, if you're already an investor and you like to buy single-family homes, you have, these parameters that you look at. So it has to be a 3-2. It has to be in, this town or this city or within walking distance to this school. You can still do that with your IRA. So you can set those rules for yourself and look for those investments that fall within what you're comfortable with and make those investments in your IRA account. We also see people invest in condos. And again, a lot of investors prefer not to have single-family homes or prefer not to have condos. And because we're not here to give you investment advice, it is completely up to the account holder the investments that they want to make. We have clients that like multifamily, and that includes duplexes, triplexes, and apartment buildings. And so, a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, I need a certain number of doors, and IRAs can make those investments as well. We also have, because I hear about it a lot more now probably than I ever did, we have a lot of people interested and doing vacation rentals in their IRAs. So Alex mentioned earlier that, it can't be something that you're going to use personally, but, certainly if you wanted to do VRBO or anything of that nature, Airbnb, with your self-directed IRA, you can do that as well. And so those are options. And, you might find the perfect property and say, no, this is more of a long-term rental. And then a year from now, find another one and say, this would make the perfect beach rental or vacation rental. So the strategy is completely up to you.
So the basic structure of buying real estate when you use an IRA doesn't change, which is nice. So there's no fancy IRS forms. There's no need to get a tax attorney or a CPA involved, unless you would like to get their advice. But the nice thing is that the basic structure of buying a piece of real estate remains the same. There's a contract, there's going to be a settlement statement, there's a deed. The big changes come in who is on the title of that, who signs it. So in this instance, the IRA is actually buying the property. Now, think about it in a legal sense that an IRA is as different from yourself personally as Larissa and I are from each other. It is separately a legal entity from you. Although you are the primary beneficiary of it, you're the grantor, meaning you're the one that adds in assets to it, it is a separate legal entity. It is treated completely separate from you. And you are not allowed to sign on that IRA's behalf. So when you open up an account with Advanta and you roll funds over to buy real estate, the IRA is buying the property. The IRA is paying for everything. So the IRA needs to sign the contract. The IRA is going to sign the settlement statement. Any other type of documents to go along with that, the IRA is going to be signing and on title. However, there isn't any additional documentation. It's just kind of some procedural changes that are going to be different. So when you pull up a deed in public record, you're going to see Advanta IRA, FBO, IRA number. So it's going to be actually in the IRA's name. And then all of the income from that property goes directly back into the IRA. So think about it like if Microsoft stock pays a dividend. That goes directly back into your IRA, and it just continually builds cash in that account. The same basic principle works with real estate. The dividend, instead of being paid out by a stock, the income, the rental income, think about it as a dividend, is being paid out by the property renter and going directly back into the IRA completely tax exempt. So all of the appreciation on the property, all of the cash flows of the property are completely non-taxable, and everything with regards to the process of managing and buying the property is essentially the same, just with a different owner, in this case, be it your IRA.
There are a lot of benefits to investing in real estate, and our investors tell us all the time, this is what I like about real estate. This is why I like this as an investment for my IRA. So, a big thing is going to be growth with rental income. So not only do you have this tangible asset, which is another great reason to invest in real estate, but you also have, monthly income. Depending on the type of rental you might have weekly income. So there's some growth at all times, and you kind of already know what the area can rent for and what you're anticipating in rent. And so that's a great benefit of holding real estate in an IRA. Another benefit from a rental standpoint is that when you're ready to start taking distributions at retirement age, you're essentially leaving the principal in there, the principal being the piece of real estate, and taking distributions on the growth. And so if you have a $1,500 a month rental income on that property and you just take distributions of that $1,500, you're really not touching the principal investment in your retirement account. As long as you have it rented, your income stream continues. So if you lose a tenant and you're able to put one right away, your income stream continues. Again, it's a tangible asset. Real estate always holds some value. So I know a lot of us kind of went through, what happened during the recession and real estate values going down. But the great thing about it is that the real estate still existed. And so if you lost money in the stock market, as many of us did, but you had some real estate, something that you were holding, whether it was your personal property or investment property, you know that although the value went down, it didn't disappear. And so holding something like real estate is a huge advantage over something that you can't see, hold, drive by. And you can also partner funds to have more buying power into investments. So we talked about something like multifamily investments. A lot of those are individuals partnering to make those investments. And so if you're not comfortable, or if you haven't done a real estate investment before, maybe you'll find a partner that has, and you're basically having them guide you through that process and at the same time making an investment.
So some of the downsides, you can't look at this whole picture through rose-colored glasses. You have to be very pragmatic about it and understand that there are some downsides to it. Real estate, it's not up here. It's a very expensive asset. It is not buying a share of Microsoft or IBM. It is several tens, if not hundreds, if not millions of dollars. So you are buying something inherently very expensive. So there is definitely something to be said for that. Another thing is that this is an asset that requires maintenance. Unlike stocks and mutual funds and bonds, there's continual maintenance that needs to be done with properties. Every year you're going to get a property tax bill, that the IRA is not exempted from that. So that is a continual continual cost that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to deal with tenants, toilets, termites, things that come up in the normal course of renting out a property are going to be the burden to bear of the IRA. So you're going to have to pay for termite control, a plumber to come out and fix a toilet. If a tenant has an issue, those are things that you inherently are going to need to look at and be very realistic about how well you think you can handle those kind of things. There are liability issues associated with this. When you buy a piece of real estate, the owner, in this case the IRA, assumes the liability for things that happen on that property, such as someone tripping and falling. Things along those lines can certainly be an issue. And then that brings up a good point of continuing expenses that you do need to carry liability insurance for this. You don't have to, but it's one of those things where, if someone trips and falls and they sue your IRA, they can take your entire retirement account instead of having, just taking the limits of the policy that you have. Again, maintenance and repairs, if you have a roof that needs to be replaced, if you have appliances that need to be updated, these are all expenses that have to be paid by the IRA. You cannot float or otherwise cover your IRA's expenses for this. You actually have to make sure the IRA has funds on reserve or in hand, whether it be here at Advanta or being able to be transferred from another custodian that can cover these types of expenses. And if you do have to do financing within an IRA to cover some type of expense or unexpected bill that comes up, you do expose the IRA to a taxable liability. That is a presentation all in and of itself as to explain how that works, but just understand that if the IRA has to borrow money for any reason, then it would be exposed to certain types of taxes. Now, when we say borrowing, we're not referring to the IRA lending money. That's just when the IRA has to take in debt, not when it issues debt. And then the other unfortunate thing is that you really cannot utilize this property at all. That means you cannot do any type of sweat equity. You can pretty much do everything until it comes to swinging a hammer or rolling a paintbrush. That's kind of the cheesy little analogy that I tell people is that, you can go in, look, say, hey, yeah, the toilet really is broken. Hey, yes, you can really see through the ceiling into the sky. You can go in and make sure the work's done, that the tenants are happy, that everything's done correctly. You just can't pick up, and actually, nail the board to the roof or actually fix the pipe that's leaking. So just keep that in mind that, you do have a potential higher burden of expenses, but you do have a lot of opportunity for making a lot of money in real estate as well with appreciable gains, with cash flow income. So there's some definite upsides to this.
So we're going to talk now, we're going to give you an example, something very common that we see with a self-directed IRA. I don't know about you, Alex, but I probably talk to at least 10 people a week that want to invest in something that they're going to buy and hold. Is that pretty typical? Is that what you're seeing?
I would say a majority of people are not looking to fix and flip right now, because the main reason I think is that property values have, although they continue to rise, they're not doing it like they were 3 or 4 years ago where people can turn around and flip something. The markets are stabilizing to a point to where that the long-term hold seems to be a bigger attractant to most people, but that is all market-driven. That's just kind of what we're seeing here in Florida. So yeah, I'd say most people are pretty much looking for the long-term right now.
So our case study here on real estate is going to be, something that we see run-of-the-mill every day. So basically in this example, Susan finds a great deal on a house that needs some work, and she decides that because it's going to be an investment property, this would be the perfect property for her retirement account. So she has an old 401k. Remember, as we mentioned earlier, since this is an old employer, she has access to roll that 401k into an IRA and make this investment. So, and again, remember, we don't give you investment advice. So Susan's going to negotiate the price of the property that she wants to purchase. And I always tell people, you don't want me negotiating for you because you'll end up paying more than the list price on that property. So, if you need help, enlist a professional, a real estate agent that can help you make the negotiations and write the contract. The biggest thing is the way the contract is titled, everything from contract to close, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Susan also decides that there's about $15,000 in repairs needed to get the property ready for rent. Once rented, she estimates she'll receive $1,000 a month back in rental income. So what does this process look like? Susan is going to open and fund her IRA account with Advana. That's very important because remember, we don't sell any investments, but we do hold the IRA account for you. The IRS does require that you have a third-party administrator holding your retirement account, and so that's us. We're the third-party administrator, or you may have heard it called a TPA. She found the investment, she made the offer to purchase, and she's going to submit some forms to Advana. So first, we're going to need to see the contract. We want to make sure that it's properly titled in the name of the IRA, so Advanta IRA for benefit of Susan IRA number 1234. She's also going to complete a purchase authorization form for us so that we know what other parties are involved and what the purchase price is for this. So who's the title agent or closing attorney? Is there a real estate agent involved? Who else do we need to talk to so that we can make sure we get this closing done on time? After Susan reads and approves the contract, we'll go ahead and make the security deposit for her and sign on behalf of her IRA. So that's very important. Advanta is the legal signer for Susan's IRA, so that's not a legal contract until we've signed it. And then once that's done, we'll work on the process towards closing. Now, many times, because people are generally buying in cash, we can treat this as a cash purchase. So if funds are here and available, we can close in as fast as 1 week. It's always dependent on the client, though. We need to make sure we get all the forms here in the office and the funds are here and available. And so as long as those two things are true, it's possible for us to close even in 48 hours. So it just depends on how quickly you can get everything over to us. That being said, on the day of closing, we're going to treat it as a mail away, and we will fund the investment directly from Susan's IRA account, and the purchase will be recorded in the name of the IRA. From there, all expenses for repairs, maintenance, taxes, and insurance will be paid by the IRA. And how does that get done? Susan's going to let us know when she has an expense related to the IRA, and we're going to write that check for her. So she'll send us the invoice, we'll write the check. It's very important that Susan not write any checks for expenses for her IRA from a personal account because that would be seen as a prohibited transaction. So if she needed some money from the IRA to pay an expense, she would ask us to write the check directly, because we can't reimburse Susan for any expenses. So if she wrote that check personally, first of all, that would be prohibited. And second of all, the only way a check goes from your IRA to you is in the form of a distribution. So that's something very important to keep in mind. So remember at the very beginning, we talked about the few things that are very important or key points for you to remember. All expenses are paid by the IRA and any income is received by the IRA. So that's always something that you want to be aware of. So, when you're hiring somebody to do work out there, it has to be unrelated third parties. They can be vendors you have relationships with, but you want to keep in mind that the check is going to go directly from us to them in form of payment. But if you do want to meet them out there, as Alex mentioned, and make sure that the work is done properly and to your satisfaction, we can give you the check. It'll be made out to them, and then you can meet them on site and hand them the check when you're satisfied with their work. You also want to keep in mind that anything that needs to be done is going to be determined by you as the account holder. And so we're not going to say, hey, this property isn't, up to our standards or anything like that. It's going to be completely up to you. And so if you go out there and you say, hey, all it needs is paint, I'm going to hire this vendor, please write them a check, then we're going to do that. And then once Susan has the property rented, she's going to have the rental checks made out by her tenant to Advana IRA for benefit of Susan Smith's IRA, again, number 1234. And those checks can either be mailed directly to Advana and deposited, or Susan can collect them, again, as long as they're made out directly to the IRA, and she can forward them on to us. And why would Susan want to do that? Maybe she's checking to make sure her tenants are paying on time. That's something to consider because we are not a property management company, and so we're not going to check to make sure that, Joe sent the check in before the 1st or between the 1st and the 5th. That's going to be completely up to Susan through her self-directed IRA account. I did see a question here pop up, so I'll address that in just a second. But options if your IRA is short on funds. So you could always partner, and if you're partnering with somebody that would be considered disqualified, meaning somebody directly related to you, then you can still partner. It just needs to be done at the outset. So if Susan finds she's short on funds after the investment is made, she can't include somebody considered prohibited or up and down her lineal tree. So it would have to be some business partner, possibly some third party that she brings in as a partner. Again, if she wanted to partner at the outset, maybe with her spouse, personal funds, or other IRAs, she could do that as long as the investment is new to her and new to the IRA. She can make an annual contribution as long as she's eligible. She can move money between IRA and retirement accounts as often and whenever she would like. So if she has some other retirement account, maybe with Fidelity or Charles Schwab, she can do a transfer at any time to make up for the shortfall that she might have in her self-directed IRA. She can borrow money. Now remember, again, if you're going to borrow money, if the IRA is borrowing money, it has to be in the form of a non-recourse loan, meaning that she's not giving a personal guarantee for that loan. And that, one, the IRA is going to make those payments, and two, it does expose the IRA to a tax called UDFI, or Unrelated Debt Finance Income Tax, interchangeably known as UBIT. So some important points to keep in mind when you're making those investments. So before we go into private lending, we had a question pop up here. If the property the IRA owns in a land trust makes it difficult to find the owner, does that protect the IRA from liability? And honestly, we really can't answer that question for you, but we definitely have attorneys that would be happy to help you with that. So if you want to reach out to us offline, we'll definitely refer you to some great attorneys that can help you with questions on liability.
One thing I will kind of dig into in that is that, yes, it may obscure the ultimate ownership of it, but if, a kid drowns in a pool, these things just don't, disappear. The thing that I recommend most to people is that make sure you have good liability insurance. The best thing you can do is that, make sure that you're properly insured, so that way when this does happen, you aren't tied up in court for years, because even if it does obscure the actual title owner of a property, there's still going to have to be someone that shows up to court to represent the interests of this party. If no one shows up, they can essentially just get a judgment against the property and take it, which would be not good as well. So the biggest thing I tell people is that make sure that your insurance agent absolutely know who exactly the owner of the property is. If it's in a land trust, make sure that the land trust is named as the title owner, is named as the party insured on that. Make sure it's not like a personal LLC or yourself personally or anything like that, because the name of the game here is to make sure that the insurance agency cannot deny a claim for misrepresentation. Make sure they know exactly what's going on, because they're the ones that are going to pay out when a lawsuit, if a lawsuit comes down the pipeline. So land trusts, while they are good for, again, making it less publicly presenting, if you will, for who actually owns the property. They aren't always needed with an IRA, because we can just as easily, as Larissa was mentioning, how we title a property, Advanta IRA, FBO, Jane Smith IRA, we can leave your name off of it. So it can just be Advanta IRA, FBO, IRA number, and we're bound by several layers of privacy policies for federal banking regulations to not disclose information to any third party unless it is by a written court order or by written direction of you. So no one calls up and says, hey, 123 Main Street's owned by you. We're not going to say, oh, no, that's actually Jane Smith's IRA, just to kind of give you a little bit further information into it. So the name of the game here, we try to save you as much money as possible. I know land trusts are popular, but they're not always needed. But if you like to use one, we're happy to do so. So jumping into private lending, again, we mentioned that real estate's expensive. You're not finding $80 pieces of real estate. And if you are, my number directly here is 727-754-9954. Please call me if you find something like that, but I digress. So private lending is as varied as the day is long. So you have a lot of different things to look at here, but the primary areas that we see people operating in are going to be illustrated for you on this slide. If you're just listening in, that is going to be between traditional mortgage lending, which is where you lend someone money, and in exchange for that money, they agree to repay you, obviously, but you also get a lien against the property, meaning that if you can show a court that they did not pay you, then you get to take the property in as repayment for that debt. Now, mortgage lending can be structured in many different ways. People are most often associated with two different types of mortgage lending, be it the 30-year fixed rate mortgage or the 15-year fixed rate mortgage, because that's what's most commonly used in residential real estate. So for people that are buying their houses, I know I personally have a 30-year mortgage on my house at a fixed rate. That's what most people are familiar with, and you can certainly do that with an IRA. Now, there is some downsides to that, as you're probably going to be getting less interest if you do that in an IRA. But you don't have to do one of those two. Again, remember, there's no defined parameters as to how you do this type of lending. You can do a 5/1 adjustable note with a balloon on it. So that means that they have 5 years of fixed payments, then an adjustable rate after that, or they have a balloon. So you can have all sorts of different types of things that go on with this and really kind of make it tailor fit for the investment that you're trying to do. So that way, both you, your IRA, and the borrower can all come to the table and eat. So that's really what the name of the game is making sure everyone kind of gets a good deal in this, is that you make a return, and the person that needs to borrow money is also getting something that they can use and make good financial sense for them as well. Now, you can do short-term transactional funding. So we see people do things where they lend to someone like a restaurant to make payroll, or they're having something that they need a short-term loan for getting something fixed on a large piece of capital equipment. So you can do all sorts of different stuff with that, and those can be long-term transactional loans from anywhere from 6 months to 15 years. It doesn't necessarily matter so long as that your IRA is properly titled on the documents that you're going to be using for this. Now, there does not have to be security, meaning that you do not have to have a piece of collateral securing the loan. Now, this might sound frightening to some people, and it rightfully should, meaning that if the person decides not to pay you, well, then your IRA has to sue them for recovery, which can be problematic because if they're not paying you, that means they're probably not paying anyone else, which probably means they don't have any money to pay anyone. So the advantage to unsecured lending is that you get to charge a significant premium for the lack of security. Typically, we will see those rates be, roughly, 2/3 to maybe double sometimes what a traditional mortgage loan would be at 13 or 15 years. Now, you do need to check with whatever state that you're lending in to make sure you don't run afoul of rules called usury laws, which affect the amount of interest you can charge on a loan to someone. So just keep in mind there are some restrictions out there, but unsecured lending, kind of the old adage of risk versus reward, inherently is going to be riskier, but the reward can be significantly higher. Now, one thing I personally really find interesting, having worked through this job here for right at about 7 years, is this thing called equity participation. And we see it a lot in markets where there will be maybe a very, very highly increasing, a very fast increasing value in a particular market. And someone wants to get in quickly and they want to fix it up, but they just need someone to that they can essentially maybe defer payments with. So Bob the builder comes up to me and says, "Hey Alex, I'd like to borrow some money." I say, "Okay, Bob, great. Here's $180,000 for this house that you'd like to buy. The house needs $80,000 worth of work. Bob is going to buy it for $100,000, but Bob's like, hey, I really need all 180, and that's really all my cash flow right now is just that $80,000. And I say, okay, great. What we're going to do instead of you making payments to me is that we're going to say that this is a 5-year loan that balloons in 5 years with no payments, but I get 20% of the profits that you make from this actual investment. Okay, great. So Bob buys it, fixes it up for 180, and then I get the spread of 20% of the profits on it. So it allows people to actually get the investment they'd like to do, and it allows the investor to actually make some upside profit in it as well. And there's also different types of security as well. You don't just have to have it secured by real estate. You can secure it with things like farm equipment, automobiles, livestock. You can do uniform commercial code, say that 5 times fast, lending as well. So there's all sorts of different things you can get involved in. It doesn't just have to be traditional mortgages. It can be short-term. It can be unsecured. It can be equity participation. It really is a lot of really cool stuff that goes on with lending.
So another great thing about being the bank, as we like to say, in a self-directed IRA is that you get to determine the rate at which your IRA is going to grow. And so that means that you're going to say, okay, I'm willing to lend this amount at this interest rate, and this is the type of security that I want. So as Alex talked about, some of it could be unsecured, but a lot of times it's secured by real estate. There are other notes secured by farm equipment and the like. So there's a lot of different strategies for private lending, and you as the bank get to make all of the decisions when it comes to that. And so when you sit down, when you borrow money from a bank, you're going to say, okay, they're going to tell you, okay, this is what we're willing to lend you. This is how much you have to put down, and here's your interest rate. Take it or leave it. And so when you're the bank, you get to do the same. And so if you say, okay, I'm willing to lend $50,000 at 10%, it has to be a first mortgage secured by real estate, then that is exactly what you're going to lend your money out at. And so you know that the return on that IRA is going to be 10% in my example. And so that's a huge benefit to private lending. And so is it interest only? Is it amortized? Or you getting regular payments? Or is it a one-time balloon payment? Whatever you're comfortable with is how you're going to structure the deal. As I mentioned, there's a lot of benefits, and so you get to act as a bank and determine the terms. Setting the rate at which your IRA is going to grow. I know some people that won't lend money unless they're getting 12%. I know some people that are happy with 8% as long as it's long term. And so whatever it is that you're comfortable with is how you can manipulate your IRA and get your money to work for you. There's also less liability than owning real estate directly in the IRA. So think about that slip and fall scenario that Alex mentioned. When there's a slip and fall, who does the tenant want to sue or want to go after? Is it the owner or the mortgage holder? Well, it's going to be the owner, right? So as a mortgage holder, you don't have that liability that the owner of the property does. It can also be very low maintenance. So if you make an investment with a good borrower, they have a good track record, and you know that they're going to make their regular payments on time and in the right amount, then that is like a set-it-and-forget-it investment for your IRA account. And you can also partner funds among IRAs and other individuals if you want to lend on something that might be a little bit bigger and kind of expound on your ability to make an investment. So maybe instead of lending on a single-family home that's a fix and flip, now maybe you're putting money together to lend money so that you have somebody has the ability to buy a multifamily project that they're going to buy and hold. So lots of opportunity in private lending.
Yeah, and some of the pitfalls that come down to this is that, the big thing that you really give up is property equity growth, meaning that if property values skyrocket in a particular neighborhood and you lend someone $100,000 on the property and the property goes up to $400,000, well, you're really only going to get back any outstanding interest and your principal. It's kind of unfortunate, but the trade-off is that, if someone trips and falls on that property, you're not getting sued. They didn't trip and fall over the mortgage note, the piece of paper. They tripped and fell over something that was neglected by the property owner. So that's the biggest one that I see out there, just from a personal standpoint, is that you do not get to participate in the equity growth. Now, the way that you do that is with equity participation. Again, one of the reasons why I think that is really cool. So there is a timeline for a note. There is a term, or what people call a period to the note, meaning that there's a set amount of time that you have your money out there that is going to be making money for you. You lend someone $100,000 for 15 years, you're going to be making money on that for 15 years. So at 15 years and 1 day after it pays off, well, what do? With a property, you could have a property rented out for 30, 40. My wife's grandmother was renting a house for 48 years, so with the same owner. So there was and eventually he wanted to sell it, and that's why he got out of it. But, you don't have that ability with a promissory note. It's actually against the law in most states to do an open-ended promissory note. There does have to be a finite date to them. So your cash flow will eventually run out and end. And it's not always as easy as going out and finding a piece of property. People don't just put on the MLS saying, hey, I need $100,000 at 8% for 15 years. They say, hey, I have a property I'm selling, and then you have to go out and find the person that's trying to buy that, and then that needs to borrow the money. So finding the deals to lend on can be a little bit more arduous than just finding a piece of property to buy. And then the point of locking in interest rates, yes, that can be good and bad for you. So let's say you lend out and the interest rate, the going rates are 8% for private money. Well, let's say the prime mortgage, the prime rate for institutional lending goes up to 8%. Well, now the private money is going to be going up by a commensurate amount, so you're going to kind of shortchange yourself. It does work very well in the other direction, and we've pretty much seen interest rates either stagnate or decline since about the Bush administration. So, currently that could be perceived as an advantage, but just keep in mind that just as easily as it can be a norm for 20 years, it can go and do something exactly the opposite for the next 20 or 30. So you have to keep in mind that you are kind of locking yourself in with that. Now, a way to mitigate that would be to have an adjustable rate on the mortgage. When you are doing private lending, typically you're not lending to owner-occupied properties, so the ability to write in an adjustable rate is much greater. However, a lot of people don't like that, so you have to know your market with that. And then you may have to follow the project you lend on. So if you're lending someone money and they are actually fixing and flipping the house, you do have a vested interest in making sure they do that work good. If they put in really shoddy craftsmanship and work into the property, your $180,000 loan that you lent out on that property, they might have made it worse. They might have made a house that was worth $250 worth a lot less if they have to rip all the electrical work out and there's nothing's done to code. So it is not as set it and forget it as some people would like to expound that are maybe trying to sell notes. So just keep in mind that there is a lot of things that you need to look at past just the ability of them to repay and the fact that you have a piece of property that today is worth a certain amount of money. And you're not only doing due diligence on the property, so making sure that the property, is not sitting on top of a toxic waste dump or something else like that. You need to make sure that the borrower is not someone that is going to cash your check one day and then fly out to, a non-extradition country the next day. You need to make sure that you're doing the research on these people, that you know them, maybe doing a credit check on them or having them provide you with a current background check. Things that, a typical lending institution would do. You are now becoming that bank. So you need to take on that role and make sure that you understand, not only what you are lending on, but whom you are lending to. All right, so we're going to get into a case study with a mortgage. So in this deal, Paul has $120,000 and a 401k, but he's interested in a little bit higher returns, aren't we all? After research, he realizes that he could loan the money out of his IRA under some terms that he can control. Remember, he's acting as the bank. He gets to decide everything that's going to go on with this. So he goes after it. He looks at unsecured lending. He looks at everything else like that. He decides that he wants to lend as a first mortgage, meaning that in the event of default, he is the first person in line to get paid and collect on that property in the event that the individual does not repay him. So he works with a mortgage broker to lend out $120,000, and the mortgage broker finds him a borrower. So the terms of the note are $120,000 at 8% interest on a 5-year balloon, meaning that they're going to make monthly payments of $800 to his IRA, which represents the 8% interest on the outstanding $120,000. And then they're going to do that for 5 years, and at 5 years and 1 day, he will get the $120,000 returned to him in full. So think about it just kind of like a CD, but with a better rate.
So what does that look like? I mean, it's very similarly to how we talked about the case study for real estate, where there were some steps that involved Advanta as a third-party administrator. So it's going to be the same exact for Paul as it was for Susan. He's going to open his IRA account. Remember, he already found the loan, and he decided that he felt comfortable with this investment. He decided the rate and the term that he would agree with the borrower on, and he fills out some forms for us. So basically, he's going to complete a form that says, this is the investment I'm making, these are the terms of the note, please fund on this day. And once we receive that and the note and the mortgage read and approved from Paul, we're ready to make that investment. And remember, on our end now, in this case study, we are the bank or the lender for Paul, and so we're going to help him make that investment. So he's going to tell us who the closing attorney is or the title agent, and we're going to send the money over as if we were the bank. And once all of that is done, they'll be ready to close on that property. After close, the borrower sends the monthly interest-only payment to Advanta for benefit of Paul's IRA. We deposit those checks to Paul's IRA, and he can track that by emails that he'll receive upon the deposit as well as online. When the borrower decides to sell the house, they're going to pay off Paul's IRA, and Paul's interest-only note will go back, all of the payments plus the principal, with no capital gains, and Paul is ready for the next investment. So again, just keeping in mind that the agreement between Paul and the borrower are whatever the terms they agree upon. When the borrower is ready to pay off, he's going to reach out to Paul, let him know, hey, I'm going to pay this note off. What do I need to do? And then Paul will let us know what the next steps are for his IRA account. When he has that money back, again, Paul can turn around the next day and lend that money at the terms that he decides he wants to lend at.
All right. I've been alluding to it. I've been kind of briefly giving you some synopsises of it, but what is equity participation and how exactly does it work functionally? What's it look like on paper? So in this case, Andrea belongs to a local real estate investing club, and she's interested in doing maybe a joint venture with someone who buys and fixes foreclosures. So she doesn't exactly know what she wants to do, but she wants to participate in some of the upside to it, but she doesn't exactly want to be fixing and swinging hammers and rolling paintbrushes. So she has $100,000 invested in mutual funds, and she realizes that she's going to make a better return doing this than she will playing the market. So she performs her due diligence on Steve and the property that Steve's looking to fix up. So any due diligence costs are paid by the IRA, so if she wants to pay for a background check or a credit check or whatever else she wants to pay for, it needs to be paid for from the IRA. So she gets everything back. She feels comfortable with it. She offers to lend Steve the $100,000 to buy and fix the property. So she gets to determine everything regarding the loan. So she gets to determine the amount borrowed, what the interest, if there is going to be an interest rate, the length of the term of the note, so the period of the note, whether it is amortizing or interest only, if there's prepayment penalties, meaning that, and something I guess that we didn't define is what does amortizing mean? It means that you're paying each payment some of the principal, so some of what you borrowed, and the interest on the loan. A loan can either be amortizing or interest only, meaning that you don't pay down the principal, you just pay the interest. If the loan is paid off before a certain time, then there might be a penalty as well, called a prepayment penalty. The equity participation terms of the loan and the lender's fees and late payment penalties and everything that goes into this document is going to be completely negotiated and at the direction of the client. So Andrea is getting to determine all of this. She's getting to act fully as the bank in determining all these terms. So now, what does it look like on paper? So she decides to lend out the $100,000 to Steve. The interest rate is 5%, and the equity participation is 1/3 of the profits that Steve sells the property for. And at 2-year balloon note, meaning that in 2 years, the note is going to have a balloon payment of whatever is outstanding on the actual loan, and she gets a first mortgage on that. Now, Andrea's attorney prepares the note and mortgage. She has to read and approve all the documents before we send any funding out, and she has to complete a few basic documents, a purchase authorization, for us to fund the note. Now, it's easy enough to see that you have a 5% loan on $100,000, 1/3 of the profits at closing, with a monthly payment of $420. So Steve's ready to pay off the loan because he's selling the property for $130,000 net after closing costs. Let's just pretend that it's a round figure. You request the payoff amount, and then the loan servicer provides it, and then the payoff letter is sent to the title company for the closing. So the IRA is in this for $100,000. She got the several years of payments totaling $2,500, and her 1/3 of the profits is $10,000. So she has $12,500 in this deal. So she had a 12.5% return on her $100,000 for this. Now Steve also got to come to the table and eat because he borrowed $100,000, fixed it up, sold it for $130,000, and after repayment of the loans and everything for $12,500, walked away with $17,500 in this. So you can see in this deal that both people got to make a solid profit. One person got to pay 0 taxes, so although Andrea did potentially make a little bit less, she also didn't have to pay any taxes, so potentially she walked away from this ahead of where Steve was, that's going to have to pay taxes on his $17,500.
So at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned we're going to talk a lot about different strategies, and here's your key points again. Just remember, any IRA or former employer plan qualifies for self-direction. You choose the investment, and all expenses are paid by the IRA, and any income is received by the IRA. And I just want to remind you, because we really didn't have that many questions, but if you do have any questions, go ahead and get them typed in so we can get them answered. Just keep in mind that, in order to make these investments, you do have to have an account with Advanta IRAs. You're going to open and fund the account and start investing. And I know a lot of times people are just waiting for that perfect investment to come along. So we can still help you if you start with step 3, but just keep in mind that we're going to be limited by how quickly the funds are here at Advanta and available. So if you have an administrator that takes 30 days to get money over to us, then we can't make the investment on your behalf until that money is here in 30 days. So if you're going to start actively looking for an investment for your IRA, now's the time to get your account open. If you have questions on how to do that, reach out to Alex and me, and we'll get you started on that process, or at least, learning about that process. You can always find our webinars, including this one, will be posted on our demand page, and also if you go to YouTube and search Advanta IRA, you'll find all of our archived webinars there, so you'll have the opportunity to listen to this one again. You can also check out our blog and attend any events. If we have anything going on in your local area, you can check out advantaira.com/events for more information on that. I didn't see any, I have one question that just popped up. Does expenses include legal fees? The answer is yes. So let's say that you do have if you did lend money and that money is based or tied to a property and that borrower does stop making payment and you do have to foreclose, when you hire that attorney to help you with that process, those legal fees do need to be paid out of the IRA. So do keep that in mind when you're structuring the note. So if you're not doing the note and mortgage and you're having your attorney help you with that, those legal fees also need to be paid out of the IRA. If you're paying an attorney for closing, if you have a title company helping you with that, again, all the closing costs are going to be paid by the IRA account. So great question. Thank you for that. At this time, I don't see any other questions, so we're going to go ahead and conclude the webinar, but thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Alex.
Thanks, Larissa.